Hey class, have you ever wondered what happens to your possessions when you die? The person that dies is called the decedent. Bob has just died from a heart attack, leaving his possessions, house, money, and debts to his wife and 4 kids. Who will receive the property? Who will gain his possessions? Who will handle his money? And who's responsible for his debts? This is when the court turns to a person's will.
A will is a document that contains information about how the decedent wants to handle his possessions and money once he dies. It is very important to have a will to avoid complications and disputes between family members.
When someone dies, hope to God he has a will. When someone dies with a valid will, it is referred to as a testate. Having a will lets a person pick where they want their property to go. If Bob died with a will, he would be considered the testator. A testator is a person who makes a will. In Bob's case, he leaves his property to his wife and names her the executor. An executor is a personal representative chosen to carry out the directions in a will.
So what makes a valid will? Testamentary intent is the one thing that makes a will valid. In this case, the testator must have intention that he's signing his own will. One must know that it's his own will and have intent. And secondly, one must not have outside pressure. An example of this would be someone who is locked in a room and forced to sign a contract. This would be invalid because this person lacked testamentary intent. Testamentary capacity is the second thing that makes a will valid. The testator must have capacity to know the extent of property within the estate that he is handing to others. Making a written and signed will is a third way to make a will valid. This must be witnessed by at least 2 adults, and the witness cannot be someone who inherits anything
Mary was going to give her estate to her best friend Sally, but Sally stole Mary's favorite pair of Crocs, which were limited edition with froggy gibbets. Mary was not happy. Mary immediately called up her lawyer and wanted to see how she could remove Sally from her will.
What do you do when you want to change your will? If an estate is involved, there is a required state codicil. This is a formal written and witnessed amendment to a will and must be executed with the same formalities as a will. But wait, there are some exceptions to these valid wills. One is a holographic will, which is written and signed entirely by the decedent and not witnessed, which is an oral will.
Second is a nuncupative or oral will, which is recognized if it's proclaimed during the will maker's last illness or by service personnel on active duty. If an officer on duty is putting his life in danger and he chooses to orally amend his will at that time, saying, "I want my best friend to have my dog," then it would be legally recognized. This will must be witnessed and handwritten within a short time.
Revoking a will requires the testator to destroy or thoroughly deface it. If the will cannot be found when the testator dies, the will is considered revoked. Distribution of property after death. If there is a will, it is followed according to the written instructions, but the spouse of the decedent can alter it to gain more from the estate as long as there are not a pre- or post-nuptial agreement between the two. In such a case where there are no inheritors of a will, the property of the deceased reverts to the state.
Now that wasn't too hard, but what if the person dies without a will?
Dying without a will is called dying intestate. When a person dies without a will, the probate court is called upon to appoint a personal representative called an administrator. An administrator uses the decedent's estate to pay all debts of the decedent. The remainder of the estate will then be distributed based on that particular estate's intestacy statute. Intestacy statutes call for the surviving spouse to receive 1/3 to 1/2 of the estate, with the remainder divided equally among the children.
Will should be made when something changes. For example, when you have kids, get sick, or win the lottery.
Trusts. Trusts occur when someone transfers property to another person as a separate legal entity. When the trustee gains the property, they have to use it in the way that the trust advises. This does not mean that if you're the trustee of a $10 million estate that you get all of that money. It just means that you must oversee that this money is used as it was directed. A beneficiary is a person who receives the property that the trust assigns them. The settlor is the person who makes the trust.
Be careful who you trust.
If the trustee acts in breach of the trustee may become liable for it. Spending monetary resources in a different manner than the trust assigned them to be spent is considered breach of contract. For example, fraud or negligence. The settlor of the trust must have intent and capacity to create a trust.
Try not to die, because this section is death.
Inter vivos trusts are trusts created during the lifetime of the settlor.
A will testamentary trust is a trust after death, but within accordance to directions of the settlor.
Revocable trusts may be canceled or amended at any time prior to death of the settlor.
Charitable trust is a trust created for a good-natured purpose and created for others. For example, a trust created for a hospital to buy a new X-ray machine.
A private trust is for private purposes.
Spendthrift trust protects beneficiaries' interests and property from their creditors. For example, Megan won't be liable for any of Greer's debts.
An express trust is a clearly written or oral statement.
An implied trust is created when someone attempts to create an express trust but fails. This leads to either a resulting trust or a constructive trust. A resulting trust is when the beneficiary cannot receive the benefits, so the settlor of the resulting trust holds the property. A constructive trust is when property was obtained in an illegal way, such as fraud or duress, so it must be transferred to another person.